The garage was empty in the exact shape of Ruth Whitaker's blue Buick. The oil mark was still on the concrete. Dark, narrow, familiar. On the shelf beside the freezer sat her canvas grocery tote, folded too neatly, as if someone had taken it from the trunk and decided her errands were over. The car was gone. Not borrowed. Not at the mechanic. Gone. I stood at the edge of Ruth's garage that morning with my purse still on my arm, and for a few seconds I did not say anything. There are absences that do not need to explain themselves. You see them. Your body understands before your mind has the manners to ask. Ruth was sitting in a lawn chair just inside the open garage door. She was not crying. That would have made her easier to read. She had both hands folded on her lap. Her back was straight. Her shoes were placed neatly together. Her eyes were fixed on the road beyond the driveway. I had sat across from Ruth Whitaker at a bridge table for 6 years. I knew the difference between her silence and her manners. That morning she was not being polite. She was holding herself still because something in her life had been moved without her permission. Ruth was not a woman who needed much. She needed her Thursday bridge table. She needed the pharmacy counter where Mr. Ellis still called her Mrs. Whitaker, even though she had told him at least 12 times to call her Ruth. She needed the grocery aisle at Miller's Market, where she chose peaches one by one and put back the bruised ones with a kind of private fairness. She needed the Sunday drive to church, where she parked under the maple tree because by 11 the shade reached the driver's side door. None of those things sounded like freedom until the car was gone. "Ruth," I said. She did not look at me right away. "Daniel took care of it," she said. She spoke the sentence as if someone had handed it to her and told her it would make everything sound civilized. I looked at the empty space again. There was dust along the wall where the bumper had never quite reached. A faint, half-moon mark on the drywall where Ruth had once opened the driver's door too wide and laughed at herself for 2 straight minutes. The car had left, but the shape of it had not. That is sometimes the cruelest part of losing something late in life. The world does not erase it cleanly. It leaves the outline so you can understand exactly what is missing. "When?" I asked. "Monday." It was Thursday. 3 days. 3 days with no car in the garage and no way to make the space tell the truth gently. Ruth finally turned toward me. "After the mailbox," she said. I knew about the mailbox. Everyone at Bridge knew about the mailbox because Ruth had told it on herself before anyone else could. She had backed into the post at the end of her driveway. Not hard, not fast. Just enough to tilt it and bruise the rear bumper. She had laughed about it then. "I fought the United States Postal Service," she had said, "and the mailbox won." It had been funny at the time. But families have a way of taking one small incident and turning it into a verdict. "Daniel was worried," Ruth said. I nodded. I believed that. Worry is often sincere. That does not make it harmless. "He came over Tuesday with the insurance folder," she continued. "He said the premium would go up. He said the car needed work. He said the dealership had made a fair offer." She looked back at the oil mark. His name was on the title. I put it there years ago, for convenience. Her mouth tightened on that word. In case I was sick. In case the battery died. In case something ordinary happened. She swallowed. I did not know convenience could grow teeth. I stepped fully into the garage and sat on an overturned bucket across from her. The kind of bucket every garage has, even in houses where no one remembers buying it. I did not ask whether she should still be driving. That was not the question sitting between us. Maybe Ruth had reached the age when driving needed to be discussed. Maybe the mailbox mattered more than she wanted to admit. Maybe Daniel had lost sleep imagining a phone call no child wants to receive. All of that could be true. But truth does not excuse the order of things. A serious conversation should have come before the car left the garage, not after. On the shelf, the canvas tote seemed to embarrass the whole room. I stood and unfolded it. Inside was a grocery list, written in Ruth's small square handwriting. Peaches, stamps, coffee filters, a birthday card. Not emergencies, not luxuries, just the errands that make a day belong to the person living it. Ruth reached for the paper. Her fingers closed around the list. Not sharply, not theatrically, just enough to wrinkle the word peaches until it was no longer easy to read. Her hand was trembling. Not from illness, from the humiliation of having an ordinary Thursday taken from her and called protection. A car door closed outside. Daniel had arrived. He came through the side gate carrying a paper bag from the pharmacy. He was a tall man in his 40s, with his mother's eyes and the exhausted face of someone who believed being practical made him innocent. He stopped when he saw me. "Judge Hart," he said. "People still call me that when they are nervous." "Evelyn is fine," I said. He looked at his mother. "Mom, I brought your prescription." Ruth did not reach for the bag. "I used to pick that up myself." Daniel exhaled through his nose. "I know." "No," Ruth said. "You know where it came from. That is not the same as knowing why I went." Daniel set the bag on the freezer. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be." There it was. The sentence families use when they have already done the hard thing to someone else. Ruth's face did not change. Daniel turned to me, as if I might be more reasonable. "She hit the mailbox," he said. "The insurance is already complicated. The car needed work. My name was on the title because she put it there years ago so I could help if something happened." "I put your name there for help, Daniel," Ruth said, "not for silence." That stopped him. Only for a second. Then fear came back, dressed as certainty. "I did not take your freedom, Mom. I took away the one thing that could hurt you." Ruth looked at the empty garage. "You took away the one thing that let me leave before I had to ask." Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He had expected tears. Maybe blame. Maybe a fight. He had not expected precision. Precision can be more devastating than volume. He ran one hand over his face. "Mom, I don't sleep when it rains anymore," he said. "Not if I know you might be out there driving home in the dark." His voice cracked on the last word. That was the part Ruth could not dismiss. He was not trying to win. He was afraid. But fear can still take what does not belong to it. Ruth looked at him for a long moment. "Then you should have brought your fear to my kitchen table," she said, "not taken my car out of my garage." Daniel looked down. Not because he had no answer, because for the first time, his answer was not enough. "You can still go places," he said, quieter now. "I set things up. The pharmacy delivers. Groceries can come on Wednesdays. Helen said someone can pick you up for bridge. The church has a ride list. You won't be stranded." Ruth looked at me then, not because she wanted me to answer for her, because she wanted a witness. That is a different kind of need. A witness does not rescue you. A witness keeps the world from pretending nothing happened. The answering machine light blinked from the kitchen. Ruth stood, slowly, but not weakly. Daniel reached toward her elbow. She saw it. He stopped before touching her. That small restraint may have saved him more than he knew. We followed her into the kitchen. Ruth pressed play. Helen's voice filled the room. "Ruth, sweetheart, Daniel told us you won't be driving anymore. Don't worry, we'll arrange rides for bridge. You just rest. We'll take care of everything." The machine clicked. Ruth listened to the silence after the message as if it had said more than the message itself. Then she looked at her son. I did not know I had stopped driving, she said, until everyone else knew it for me. Daniel looked down. Not because he had no answer, because for the first time, his answer was not enough. Ruth pressed the next message, not because she expected anything important, but because her hands needed something ordinary to do. A man's voice came through. Mrs. Whitaker, this is Paul from Northridge Auto. We still need your verbal confirmation before we can finalize the release. Even with your son listed, we need to hear from you directly. Please call us back when you can. Ruth stood very still. Then she looked at Daniel. They still knew to ask me, she said. You did everything else, Daniel, but somehow they still knew where the final voice belonged. I found myself touching the button of my blazer. An old courtroom habit. Straighten the fabric. Straighten the room. Straighten the problem. When Daniel had said he was only making things easier, something in my body remembered how many times I had used that word myself. Easier. I had used it when I did not want to admit I had already decided. For 27 years, I believed a decision became fair when the facts were clear. But families are not courtrooms. In a family, a decision can be practical and still become a theft if the person most affected was never invited into it. I learned that too late in my own house. Daniel sat down at the kitchen table. He looked younger there, not innocent. Younger, as if he had arrived at the edge of his own good intentions and found something ugly underneath them. I thought I was helping, he said. Ruth's voice softened, but it did not become easy. You were helping your fear. He looked at her. You could have helped me. That was the line that hurt him. I saw it land, not because it accused him, because it gave him a version of himself he had failed to become. A son who could have sat down first. A son who could have said, Mom, I'm scared. A son who could have asked, how do we do this without making you feel like your life is being taken apart? Instead, he had solved the problem. And in solving it, he had made his mother smaller. Ruth walked back to the garage. Daniel followed, but stayed at the threshold. That mattered. Some thresholds should not be crossed too quickly after you have taken something from the other side. Ruth stood over the oil mark. I know I am getting older, she said. Daniel swallowed. I know my reaction time is not what it was. I know the mailbox was not nothing. I know there will be a day when I do not drive. Her voice trembled then, but it did not break. What I did not know was that the day had already been chosen for me. Daniel said nothing. Good. For once, nothing was the right thing. Ruth bent slowly and picked up the canvas tote from the shelf. She placed the folded grocery list inside it. Then she took the list out again and put it in the pocket of her cardigan instead. A tiny act. Almost nothing. But I have seen people reclaim themselves with less. The car did not come back that day. This is not that kind of story. There was no grand apology at the kitchen table. No perfect repair. No sudden wisdom that made everyone whole before supper. Daniel called the dealership before he left and told them the sale would wait. That was something. Not enough. But something. Ruth did not thank him for it. I was glad she did not. We have made too many older women grateful for being given back a small portion of what should never have been taken without asking. Before I left, Ruth stood at the open garage door. The afternoon light had moved across the driveway. The road beyond the house looked ordinary. That is another cruelty of certain losses. The world does not change its face just because your life has changed shape. Ruth stepped down from the garage. Daniel moved as if to help, then stopped himself. She walked to the mailbox. Slowly, carefully, not to prove she could still do everything, only because it was the one small road no one had taken from her yet. I stood beside the empty garage and watched her go. The oil mark stayed behind me. The grocery tote was no longer on the shelf. Daniel stood in the doorway of the kitchen, holding the pharmacy bag like a man who had finally understood that care is not the same as control. When Ruth reached the mailbox, she opened it. There was nothing inside. She closed it again. Then she turned and looked back at the house. Her house was still hers. The walls, the porch, the kitchen, the bridge table folded in the den, the freezer humming beside the empty place where the Buick used to be. All of it was still hers. But for the first time, it did not lead everywhere. Ruth came back from the mailbox without a letter in her hand. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired, and still, somehow, more present than when I arrived. At the garage, she stopped beside me. "I suppose," she said, "I will have to have a conversation with my son." I looked at Daniel. He did not look convinced yet, but he had stopped arranging things. For Daniel, that was the first honest silence of the day. I touched Ruth's arm lightly. "Make him sit down first," I said. "And listen?" For once, yes. That was the closest either of us came to laughing. When I drove away, I checked my rear-view mirror once. Ruth was still standing in the driveway. Daniel was beside her now, not touching her, not guiding her, not rushing her back inside, just standing. There are some repairs that begin not with an apology, but with a person finally learning not to move first. When I came home, my own car keys were on the hall table. I had left them there that morning without thinking. For one breath, I did not touch them. I only stood there and looked, not because I was afraid of driving, because Ruth had reminded me that some losses arrive first as arrangements. A ride list, a delivery schedule, a helpful son, a folded grocery tote on a garage shelf. I thought about my own children. I thought about all the decisions I had once made efficiently, cleanly, confidently, the kind that looked right from the outside, the kind that may have made the people I loved feel managed instead of known. A judge learns to ask who has authority. A mother learns, sometimes too late, to ask who has been invited. Ruth's garage was empty that day, but the emptiness told the truth. She had not lost only a car. She had lost the courtesy of being asked. And sometimes, in a family, that is the first road that disappears.